Mm. Yeah, direct action can mean a lot of things. I mean, like, I've been in a few, just not very like involved. But I guess this really breaks it down, so I don't really have anything to add. It's very gives it a thorough explanation of what direction action is.
Cool. Okay. So, like Chandine was touching on, direct action can look like a lot of different ways and a lot of different forms. So we're just gonna go over a few just to like help y'all kind of get an idea of what it can look like. Um, so I'm gonna go over the first two. So we have protests and non-cooperation. So protest is usually a physical manifestation of typically a lot of people where we rally to show the state people power, right? And this can look like marches, rallies, teach-ins, etc. And the second one is non-cooperation, which is where we strategically withdraw our power within the political apparatus that is the United States in order to protest or like fight when that power is being unjustly used against us. So that means one of the many forms of power that people hold is as consumers. So this could be boycotting certain products or institutions, um, striking our power as laborers, as our power as people who produce things in this country. We can go on strike um, when corporations are exploiting us, basically. Walkouts when it's a choice to willingly not engage in institutions that we don't see as redeemable.
And all these ways, especially the boycott and strikeouts, they're very effective, and they can most likely end it all. Like an action that can effectively end it. So if you're looking, any direct action, I don't know. I mean, that's probably the most immediate effective, if anything.
Yeah, and each of the thing I like about direct action is that there's a multitude of like disciplines and just strategies that you can employ depending on your situation. Do you want to go over the last two, Shandine?
Yeah. Oh, intervention is directly intervening and changing in the functioning of the system. So basically, wait, hold on, I'm gonna go to my notes. Um, okay. Um, I guess it's like coming together. I guess you could say, and I never really went to an intervention myself. I've been in like protests and non-cooperations, but intervention, uh, yeah, it's basically what the um, definition says right here. If anything, probably Randy can go in a little bit depth with that. I'm sorry. And creative solutions, there's all types of solutions you can go through. Developing alternative community-based systems, collectives, like coming together with your community. I think that's one huge thing because community is important, and you're all going after the same solution, and like you want to bring down the corporation or whatever, and that's basically it. Yeah. Yeah, and I guess it's all based on negotiation too with your community and everything else. Like, yeah, that's basically all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you for that, Shandine. I really like these two steps because I feel like they're really important when it comes to long-term um, practices or long-term conversations of what like direct action can lead to. So for intervention and creative solutions, the way I like to think about it is intervention is when you go into a system and you fundamentally change the way that it's operating so that it cannot continue to function the same way. um, I'm sure you all know, but a really good example for me personally is how the current uprisings across the country against the public executions of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd have brought to the spotlight a call for the defunding of the police, which again I think is a really good example of intervention strategies because it's going into an institution and it's demanding for a fundamental change to the way that policing works, because policing is essential to money and profit, right? So when we call to defund the police, we're actually um not calling for like the police to have this money, because I mean, yeah, that is what it is, but you know, taking away that money fundamentally changes the way that the police state can operate. And then with creative solutions, it's where you take away that like state power or that state emphasis in certain institutions, and you give it back to the people. So with this one, I really like it because it makes me think of police abolition, which is different from defunding the police. Police abolition is basically the destruction, the complete annihilation of the police state as an entity. And it ties into creative solutions because it takes an institution or something that we deem unjust, and it re-envisions it in a way that is in the hands of the people, right? So when we envision, when we say we don't want any police, when we say abolish the police, we are calling for the destruction of a institution that is not within the power of the people, and redistributing that responsibility and that role to the community, right? And saying, how can we envision this thing within the hands of the people? Because currently that's not what the police is, right? It's not within the hands of the people. They work as puppets in hands of the state to protect property and corporate interests, right? And so creative solutions is, again, just that conversation of envisioning these things in radically different ways with an emphasis on community health and prosperity. So why direct action? Like, why? I mean, I feel like we kind of already touched on that, but let's go a little bit more in depth as to why we would do community action from our own perspectives.
Okay, for me, it would be to obstruct or to solve these problems that the traditional society and the institutions have are that are not addressing or like not focusing on as much. So in my community, I am stationed in Flagstaff, Arizona right now, and all the direct action I've done is all community and voluntary operated. Um, Basically at here at the Tala Hawan Info Shop. So that's basically what we do is we help the unsheltered relatives, we help with mutual aid, donations and everything. And it doesn't matter, like anyone can come, like any age, if you're young, old, whatever. And back at home, I don't know if anyone knows about this. I think there's gonna be a presentation. I think there was a presentation on it yesterday, the Peabody Coal Mine. Um, there was a lot of it. We wanted environmental justice, so that's basically my perspective and what I have done personally. Um, so yeah, and there's a lot of restoration going around. So um, I was not very much involved with direct action with the Peabody Coal Mine, since it was like I was young, I was in school, and my father didn't understand like what was going on, and he wasn't um, informed, or he didn't have that knowledge of what was going on around our hometown. So yeah, it would basically be to obstruct or to like solve all these um, perceived problems, you could say, within our community, and trying to shut that down, that the institutions that are not addressing it. So that's what I have to say for my example of direct action in my region. And yeah, Randy.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you for that, Shandine. For me, my experience specifically with direct action is a lot more within like horizontal styles of organizing, but also with an emphasis on environmentalism, climate justice, environmental justice, and like indigenous sovereignty rights and land back. So the way I have seen direct action used in my region is as a means to channel and funnel people power to challenge unjust actions of the state. And it can be, direct action for me is very collaborative. It's a people process. It includes multiple groups, multiple disciplines, multiple political ideologies, multiple backgrounds that come together and strategize for tactics and that help fulfill our goals in a ways that um, benefit not just everyone, but also in a way that speak truth to our overlying beliefs about liberation um, here in so-called Salt Lake City. Some examples personally that I've seen is the Washington Square encampment, which was a coalition put on by multiple organizing groups here, in which Washington Square, where the town hall is in Salt Lake City, was occupied, the outside area, in solidarity with unsheltered folks who were being forcibly removed from the area due to rising economic development projects, such as real estate and gentrification, and also the closing of multiple homeless shelters in the valley that were a place of shelter for people who did not have one. Um, Another recent campaign was the Utah Inland Port, which was a economic project that would build essentially a warehouse district on the east side of the Great Salt Lake, which would introduce more air pollution and just carbon dioxide emissions from the various human transportation activities that would occur there, such as like car travel, airplane deliveries, stuff like that. And not to mention, it would also like ravage and displace wildlife that was natural to the area. And most frequently, what I think is interesting, because me and Shandine made this workshop, I think a little bit before or right, I think a little bit before the uprisings against police brutality. So this is like a snapshot of what direct action looked like before that. But I feel like after that, the game across everywhere has just been changed so much, and I feel like direct action is really going to a different place here in Salt Lake than I've ever seen in like the 2 years I've been in. I would consider myself an organizer here. And I feel like that's mostly highlighted in the Justice for Bernardo campaign, which is where we're having a lot more protests, a lot more direct and a lot more vocal calls for the defunding and the abolition of the police state, police accountability, and just political repression, which has been longstanding issues here. Um, and it's just creating a momentum everywhere. And like, I feel like if it's creating momentum in Salt Lake City, Utah, I'm just imagining what's happening in other places. Like, it's very exciting, but it's also very terrifying because it just means that the state is going to answer to that increased momentum in whatever ways they deem necessary. So here's a picture of the tar sands campaign that was happening. An example here of direct action is lockdown. So what you see on the top there is people strapping themselves to machinery so that that machinery cannot exploit the land that it is currently on. Right? And then you have the propaganda component where you have people making banners and artwork that display and kind of memorialize their message, so that things like pictures like these can be spread around and like spread that message of what exactly these people are doing and what for. When do we engage in direct action? I feel like it's really a good question. I'm gonna pass it over to the homie Shandine so they can speak to that.
Okay, I feel like you can engage in direct action when you want to shut things down, to open things up, to either pressure a target, to intervene in an institution, to defend something that's good, and or to shine spotlight on something that's good or bad, basically. And I feel like of every it's the heart of every human advancement. So typically people think that direct action is tied together with civil obedience and like getting arrested. Well, those are like, it can amplify the message and everything, but um, it's beautifully direct action is just something beautiful with getting like your whole community together, and you can engage in it when you feel like there needs to be a certain change in society and like in everything. Um, and you want to take that collective action to change the circumstances and without giving power to the middle person. So that's when you intervene and like you engage with direct action, So that's what I have to say.
Hold on, sorry, y'all. I need to pull up my notes because I like wrote a thing. Oh wait, y'all can see it. Oh, this doesn't look good. Okay, let me put that away and then let me fix this real quick. What's going on? Sorry, y'all. Cool. Okay, so for me personally, I think the question of when do we engage in direct action is when we see that the relationship between people and the institutions that govern them becomes too unjust, right? Naturally, I would identify as like an anarchist. So like my thing would be that like all governments are like unjust and like are all like oppressive. But I think direct action is really useful, or I think we should use it when we notice that the state is actively doing things that challenge our livelihoods. Whether that be when the state decides to lower or like pass legislation that benefits landlords to increase rents in the area, um, when the government or when legislation deems that certain centers of support or funding for centers of support in the community should be shut down, such as like community centers, homeless shelters, um, parks and stuff like that. When things like that happen, when we see that the state is actively doing things that reduce our livelihood as autonomous people, I think that's the moment when we get together in coalitions and we wield our people power to use it against the state, to show them that their power or their law or what they create is not supreme to our innate presence as people on this earth, right? Um, for me personally, no government or no law or no piece of paper will ever um, be able to decree more about what I should do with me and my being and how I should navigate this earth more than like more than I can. You know, like no paper, no like Declaration of Independence, Constitution, whatever like is gonna tell me how I should live my life. I feel like that's something that people, especially people who are like indigenous to this land, like I feel like that's their decision to make. And I think direct action helps us see that. It helps us envision that. It helps us see what people power looks like and what people power can look like, right? It can be a weapon and a tool that we can utilize to envision better futures, more communal futures for all of us. So next, I'm gonna start talking a little bit about some little my personal tips and tricks that you can take to do the act for when doing actions. Right? We talked a little bit about what they can look like, and I'm gonna just talk hopefully a little bit about some planning steps you can take. So before the action, you're gonna state or you're gonna remind yourself of your overarching objectives. So this is basically you asking yourself, what am I trying to accomplish and how can direct action get me there, right? Because what you want will inform the way that you navigate direct action. Like, for example, if you're protesting a pipeline and your overarching objective is for that pipeline to not be built, well, then you're probably going to be locking down. Like, that's what your direct action is going to look like, because you're going to be strapping yourself to that pipeline so that it is not built, right? It also probably looks like blockading roads, um, allegedly sabotaging vehicles or workers' tools so that it cannot be built. Second, you're going to want to identify the target. So within your direct action specifically, what are you going for, right? Your direct action is going to inform your overarching objectives, but in this instance of direct action, who's the target? Is it the state? Is it a politician? Is it a company? Is it a law? Is it the police? You know, who are you going after, or who are you going to use as a face for what you want to be done, right? And then that's when you have your objective and your target. That's when you start funneling it down to your plan. So what are you going to do? Are you going to do a sit-in? Are you going to do a protest? Are you going to do an interruption? Are you going to do picket? Are you going to do a boycott? Which ones do you think will be most useful in accomplishing what you need to do, right? And then number 4, which this is a very, very important step. And I think people don't think about this often because direct action is very exciting. So people don't get into the nitty grittiness of it sometimes, I feel like. But you need to assess levels of risk. You need to find out um, your direct action, what it looks like, and how, what risks are going to be taken during that action, right? Like, are people going to get arrested? If that's not the plan, is it a possibility? Are people going to be frontlining against police, right? If you're going to be barricading, um, are people going to get hurt by other things like maybe counter protesters? You know, you need to think about things that could not necessarily go wrong, but things that you know could show up when you're doing these actions to ensure the safety of the people around you, especially when the people around you have like less positionality than you, like especially when it's browner folk, especially when it's black folk, especially when it's poor folk, right, who have historically witnessed or felt the force of the punitive carceral state much harder than white people. And then after, you're going to assess action care after the action. So you're going to think about once it's over, what are you going to do to make sure that your community is still safe, right? Are you going to do jail supports? Are you going to do mass signal threads to check in with folks and how they feel? Are you going to hold like meditative sessions so people can process and just unpack what they just did, right? These are all things that people should take into consideration, I would say, before doing an action, because you need, because it's important not only for ensuring safety, but you also need to know that your direct action is not an isolated incident and connects to a larger movement and larger objectives that maybe you don't see in the moment, right? And I feel like keeping an eye on those things helps you keep that clarity when you're engaging in this work that can often, like, sometimes be very violent, you know. And then during the action, I'm just gonna go over this fast because I feel like I'm talking too much. But number 1, be present. Okay, know where you are, know who's around you, who's filming, where the pigs are, you know, all that stuff. Number 2, stick to the plan. If you, any good action has a good plan or has a thought out plan. I know that emotions run high, and I know that things don't always go according to plan, but I feel like to ensure, again, to ensure the plan and the safety of the people that you plan the action with, you need to do your responsibility as a member of that direct action to stick to the plan as much as you can, right? And if you see that plan falling apart in front of you, you need to ensure that you have strategies or ways that you can put that plan back on track, right? And that's just not something one person should do. I feel like anyone participating in an action has a responsibility to keep that in mind. 3, kind of 2 and 3 are the same. Backup plans. So in case things go haywire, in case cops get violent, in case counter protesters show up, always have backup plans for situations like that. So just so you can ensure the safety of people there. Direct action etiquette. Okay, so like, I feel like this is pretty simple. Don't video people, you know, don't take pictures of people. Don't go around talking about to people about things you do during an action, because that puts not just you at risk, it puts your comrades at risk. Like, security culture, y'all. Do not go around um, showing off basically the things that you do, because that things put your people at risk and it puts your movement at risk, right? Because then it makes it open to infiltration by the state. And then number 5, a general one, is just always go in with the crew and then always leave with the crew. Always make sure you have a buddy, and make sure that everyone leaves the action in a safe way. So, and usually that's ensured by not leaving alone, because then it's harder for the state to like kind of corner you when you have people with you. Next, we have this direct action guidelines that we saw from Decolonize This Place that were really good. So we figured that we'd include it in here. Shandine, do you want to go over it?
Yeah. Okay. Come prepared. Wear clothes you feel comfortable in. This is what I cannot stress. Running shoes. Please wear running shoes. No sandals, no high heels, no nothing. Don't need to look cute. I mean, yeah. Layers for the weather lately. I mean, it's been hot, but hey, during the winter it does get cold. And make sure you bring little snacks like water, energy bar, I don't know, a little banana, whatever. a bandana lately, and yeah, because it's good to cover up, like to wear layers of clothes, like at least cover up everything, you know. And then secondly is roll with the crew. We roll together in affinity groups. Uh, and this is what I learned like just recently is basically what is in this in the description is to share your contact info because before I lost my crew and that is not good. um, yeah, you share your info. Oh, what happened? Um, but yeah, basically, that's that. You share your info, uh, a meetup point, whatever. Stay in contact with everyone, and yeah, that's about it. I think they like moved the slides. I don't know if it moved twice. I think you have to go back once. Okay, yeah. Oh, we can go forward. Okay, and then at the end you can all leave together. Like you can have a meetup point and everything, get everything down. And then it's usually good to with and against traffic. Um, March with traffic in order to keep the march together, and against traffic when we need to lose vehicles or lines of cops that are tailing us. I've seen this like everywhere. Um, I haven't really been in like a. I've been in a small protest before for the Black Lives Matter, but I've seen this like in movies and videos and stuff. So I thought that was a good tactic. Like it's good to know. So make sure you keep that in mind. Um, Barricade the back. Drag objects into the street behind the march to break up vehicles or lines of cops following us. These lights blockades will also show traffic and help shut it down. Yeah, do anything to help slow, like, the cops down, whatever, whoever's following you, to slow them down. And yeah, anything you can do with anything. You can go, Randy, you can go to the next one. Get free or get moving. If someone is arrested, don't linger around too long, or the pigs will kettle the march. And this is usually good. Free the comrade, or else get their name and birthday for jail support and keep it moving. That's usually good to do, like during and after the action. Like you had to have that type of infrastructure support, I guess, like something to provide support. Like after you get their name and stuff, you can like go to them and then you have money for bail, whatever, lawyers to provide immediate support for the arrestees. And then the diversity of tactics. Everyone is free to support the cause as they see fit. We don't police each other's actions or snitch on each other to pigs or the media. At the same time, we take care not to endanger others with our actions. Um, like they say, just don't snitch. Don't be a snitch. Like, don't be a snitch on your comrades. Um, and just stick together. Yeah. And lastly, I think this part is really important. Support those directly affected. So, like Randy was saying before the action, as his little tips to give, it is good to prepare infrastructure to provide support during and after the action because um, everyone involved should be aware of what and prepared for the risks that they are taking and the criminal charges that are associated with them. Um, and it's really important to know what kind of risk you're engaging in. Um, and some people are not emotionally prepared for that. It can affect everyone differently. Um, yeah, so it's good to have that support after, like, have like a talk circle or anything to help everyone. So be a good relative before, during, and after. Um, yeah, if you want to shine some light on that, Randy.
Yeah, no, just echoing what you said about thinking about your relation to other people and engaging in direct action and how you can help that, um, how you can perpetuate that so that people are being taken care of before and during and after the action too. So I'm gonna stop sharing now because that is the last of the presentation. And then we still have about like 15-ish minutes left. So we're gonna open it up now to Q&As. So whatever questions, I believe y'all have like a chat feature on y'all screens, whatever questions y'all have, you can just type in there and then we'll answer as they come up. And I'll check in now to see if maybe y'all already did put some questions.
I saw in the chat they said, where are the graphics from? I personally don't know. If Randy knows, I don't know if you know, Randy, where the graphics are from the presentation.
The graphics, I believe, so they're from Decolonize This Place. So they have an Instagram. I think it's at Decolonize This Place. But there was just so much stuff going down in New York that they figured that they needed to make a protesting guide 101, which is where we pulled those graphics from. So yeah, I would recommend following or just keeping up with Decolonize This Place because they're doing a lot of really dope work right now. Sorry, I'm grabbing my charger right now, but I'm seeing Lyrica's question about, I was wondering how you go about dealing with folks who co-opt an action, say protests, to try and rally support for a political candidate. I think this is actually a really good thing to mention, just because infiltration can look like a lot of ways. Like there's a lot of ways that the state or just people in general can infiltrate and co-opt your movement and kind of try to take your effort and your energy and kind of spin it to further their own political agendas. Personally, I think I would say one really good precautionary step, like a preventative step, almost you could say, is definitely making sure that you know who's going to be at that action. So, for example, if there's like somebody who you've seen around who like kind of shows up to things, but you don't really see them like ever, like you don't have a good sense of what their political ideologies are, then maybe it would be a good idea to kind of find that out or like ask or create space between you and that person so that they aren't in a position where they can just hop on your stuff and just like do whatever they want with it. I also think vouching for people is really important. Being connected to community and just being able to say, I know this person, I know what they stand for, I know they're not going to sabotage our messaging, and I think that they should help us organize, right? Because I think like I will say like some actions are like for politicians. Some protests are to support like just like electoral BS, right? So I would say when folks do that, always have kind of backup plans that you can fall, that you can enact when that stuff like that happens. So if like someone tries to co-opt your speech or like someone tries to talk about voting for whoever during a protest, take the mic from that person and be like, that's not what this is about. You're not gonna talk about that here, right? If somebody shares a video of protesters and says this is in support of this person, like flag that post, right, and call it out and be like, this person has no idea what they're talking about. This is what's really going on here, right? So I would say just shut it down as soon as it comes up, when stuff like that happens. Okay, I'm seeing a question from Penny saying, I am curious about the issue of violence. One of the slides mentioned that members of a group do not police others' actions. How do you ensure strategies, tactics, and direct action protest people physically as much as possibly knowing, of course, there is always risks? Do you have anything to say about this one, Shandine?
Um, I would have to say, okay, how do you ensure strategies, tactics, and any direct action protect people physically as much as possibly knowing, of course, there's always risk? So um, it's good to establish before, during, and after to have, like I said, to have that certain type of support. Um, and it's good to have that plan down before, like your strategies. Like, of course, you always have to have a backup plan, and there is always going to be that slightest chance of risk. But tactics. It's just good to have yourself prepared and to know that before there is always going to be a risk no matter what. Um, so just ensure yourself that you're going to be okay, that everything's, going to be all right, and that your comrades are going to be safe and you're going to be safe. Um, and your tactics, as far as it goes, um, like it said, don't snitch on your comrades the way they use their tactics, like no matter if it's violent or if it's dangerous, um just all I have to say is just make sure, just know, like in your mind, like have your mentality um strong, I guess, like how you keep telling yourself that you're gonna be okay and you're gonna be safe, and your comrades, and like share your info before and after, like those are strategies that you could do. I really can't, I don't know, I can't really speak on it because like I personally haven't been in any crazy protests, but I'm pretty sure Randy can like shine a little bit of light on that since he's very familiar with direct action. So Randy, you can shine some light on that.
Yeah, thank you for asking this, Penny. I think it's actually a really, really good question. So that slide by Decolonize This Place does mention that in protest, that you shouldn't police other people's actions during that protest, right? And I do agree with that, but I also do think that that conversation of whether or not you should tell people what to do during a protest also is like very nuanced and depends on the situation, right? Like personally, I do think that I'm not always in a position to tell people what to do during a protest, but I also think that during protests, like people telling you what to do can keep you oriented to what the goals are and like risk factors that are arising in the moment, right? So for example, if you're on the front line like blockading pigs, you're probably not going to notice when there's a line of police approaching from behind, right? That's going to kettle your crowd. So in that moment, if someone tells you like, yo, they're going to kettle us, we need to go, maybe it's a good moment um, to leave, right? Or just listen to that person. I also think that, again, emphasizing on the post, every protester or every person who engages in direct action, you have to have that conversation with yourself about the responsibility you hold to the safety of yourself and your comrades while you're engaged in that action, right? So if you are going to do something during an action that can possibly put you or other people at risk, you need to have a really good conversation with yourself about whether or not you should do that, right? Because it is true that in the moment things happen, people retaliate, but you need to keep that clear-headedness of what I'm doing and how it's going to affect this movement overall. Because if you put yourself in a position of arrest, like if you get arrested, people are going to have to bail you out. That's another labor people are going to have to do. And if you retaliate against police, that could justify police justifying retaliating against you, right? So all of these things are important to keep in mind when you're thinking about violence and risk, because those things not only put your body at risk, but they also put other people's bodies at risk. And some people's bodies are treated differently than your own, right? So I would say to this, Penny, is always keep that clear-headedness. Always think about your actions during a direct action and how they'll affect the people around you. And a good way to ensure that people act in safe ways is by building that community and building that coalition, and having conversations beforehand about risk, about being arrested, about the police harming you and your comrades. Right, so I think it's mostly in preventative, it's mostly in the before the action stuff. Always check in, always bring up concerns, always think about worst case scenarios, always mention worst case scenarios, because you have to be prepared if that ever does come up, right? So yeah, thank you for that question. It's a really good one. It's a really complicated one.
I see a couple of questions in the Q&A. Someone is wondering about collaborating between different groups with different ideologies and backgrounds, and how this comes with tensions. And on top of that, people in the same or different groups often have rocky histories. Can you share your approach to how to manage these tensions and differences? And then we got another one as well, if y'all want to answer the first one first.
Okay, got him. Thank you for mentioning that, Lyrica. So yeah, this is where direct actions get more complicated, is when they're in between or they're planned by different groups. And then it gets harder when those groups have different ideologies and backgrounds, because then there's always unanswered tensions that come up. So in my organizing work, what I've done is whenever a group or is already doing direct action in the community, or they come to me about collaborating on like direct actions, what I do is I always not scope, I don't want to say scope them out because that sounds sketchy, but I always do take that moment to just ask who they are, get familiar with their politics, the way they do things, and what they believed in, and what overarching goals they're shooting for, and whether you can like sense if that group has any like sense of like long-term like longevity. Scope out if that group is like thinking short-term or long-term, and then from there the first decision is to always decide whether you think it's smart to collaborate with this group, because there's some groups out there that like are pretty revolutionary, are pretty radical, but I disagree with on a fundamental level. And so because of that, I probably wouldn't engage in a direct action or plan a direct action with them, right? It's very possible that we might end up on the same action in different roles, right? But that's the conversation of them having to take care of their people, and then me having to take care of my people, right? I think it's totally okay for you, if you're engaging in direct action, and if you feel weird feelings, or if you feel like a certain relationship between you and a group isn't like compatible, I think it's definitely smart to maybe ask yourself whether or not it's smart to engage with that group in direct action in the future, right? Because then if you already feel like you're off on a bad foot, that's only going to get even more complicated as you start planning together and as people start engaging in direct action together. Those tensions will be highlighted, and then that's where those are kind of the holes that can destroy your movement, right? I don't know if you want to speak anything to it, Shandine.
I very much agree with what Randy has to say. To manage the tensions and differences, you really do have to get to know them. Because you really don't know a person if you don't talk to them. You get to know them. You don't, it's best to talk to them, or else you're gonna get into something you did not want to get into, or you had no idea of. So, what I have to say is, yes, talk to them. At least get like a little bit of an understanding of where they're coming from, how they work, how they get down. So that's what I have to say. And yes, think smart and think about your physical being, your well-being. Like, do I want to put myself in this position with the way they work and how like they do their thing? Like, do I want to do that to myself? And if not, like, you can always leave. Like, that's your body, your mind. Like you can always leave. So really get to know. Yeah, really, you really have to get to know them. Um, and yeah, that's basically all I have to say. And I see another Q&A from Kyan. It says, how do you prepare for a direct action when the group protesting is new and you might not know if they are going to assess the things before the actions? Also, what are some tips on finding and making affinity groups? Um, well, I really, um, for direct action, when there is a new group protesting, and I mean, it's always good to have like, more people come in, the more the merrier. But if you might not know if they're going to assess the things before the actions. Mm, I have no idea. This is kind of complicated. So, Randy, I'm gonna pass this one to you. um,
Awesome. Thank you, Shandine. I think whenever there's a new group, definitely checking them out is always probably the first step I would take personally, just getting a look into their politics and who they are and what they do and how that translates into the way they do direct action, right? So seeing the relationship between what they say they believed in and how they enact it in the material world. I think a good way of scoping out new groups is usually you can hit them up, like just shoot them a message, or you can go to a meeting. Lots of usually typically lots of groups that hold direct actions also hold like general open meetings that anyone can attend. So I think those are really good opportunities for you to like just get in there and get a good idea of what exactly um, they're thinking and how they strategize and do direct action. um they're going to assess the things before the action, so that's a really good idea. If you're not an official part of a group and you don't come into direct action, like for example, let's say a protest, if you're coming into a protest and you're not with a group, you're just by yourself, or with a friend, definitely I would say step number one, if you feel like people aren't assessing safety things or like those concerns aren't being answered um, during the action, I would say definitely one, keep your eyes open and always like keep a low proximity, keep a proximity that puts you at low risk. So if you see people getting loud, getting rowdy, getting really really like maybe it's getting into like a level of risk that you're not comfortable with, and maybe that's the time or the moment to start asking yourself if maybe you want to start thinking about leaving, or maybe spacing yourself between you and like wherever the risk is happening, right? Because in a lot of actions, depending on how it's done, there's different areas that carry different levels of risk, right? So you can always like, if you feel like the area you're in is like too risky, you can always move kind of to another part of the direct action that is less risky. If you is a good tip, if you haven't been in those meetings, or like if you are just coming in as a new person. And tips for making and finding affinity groups, I would say first look at your really close community. Find people, think of the people that you're already really close to, because chances are those people are already in affinity with you. um, I would say is the first place to start. But then if you want to start looking outside of that, that's when you start, I would say, having conversations with people. Like, for example, you have this homie, y'all are tight, but you want like kind of a crew of to start, building on. I would say have conversations with that person and kind of map out possible people you could bring in, right? And the ways you can do that is by doing like very like non-risky things. Like you can do book clubs, and it doesn't even have to be an entire book. It can be like just a reading, like a page long, and start kind of having those conversations about like ideology and see if you guys are compatible. And if you find yourself compatible with these people, that's when you can start thinking about bringing them into affinity. So I would start with looking to the community that you already have and just mapping out potential areas or potential people that you could bring into that group that you're already in affinity in. Um, And it doesn't always have to be like, let me just say, affinity groups don't always have to be like direct action oriented or protest oriented. Like affinity groups can just be people that you meet up with like on the internet and just like talk about, you know, how your days are going. You know, affinity groups can serve multiple purposes and don't always have to be um, direct action oriented. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that question.
It looks like we have one more question in the chat, and I think just for sake of time, oh, another one might have just shown up. Oh, never mind. I think maybe we can make this the last Q&A question. Coming from Penny.
Okay, I have to just say something. Her question was, when you prepare for direct action, does your planning incorporate role plays? When the student nonviolent coordination committee were participating in the South in the 60s or practice being. I feel like it is good to get yourself used, like, because it's good to have yourself prepared for what you never know what's gonna happen. Like, you know, you may get pepper sprayed, you may get, you may have to run. I don't know. You have to do all these things. So I really like that you mentioned, Penny, that the Student Nonviolent Coordination Committee, they practice being physically assaulted, being spit on, etc. It kind of reminded me of that time. This is totally off topic, but it reminded me of when I just saw this on Twitter like a couple days ago. It reminded me of that time of when this little African American girl, she was the very first black girl in her school to go, and she practiced that too. Like, she was physically assaulted, whatever. And I think it's good to have to get your skin tough and like your body and your mind tough, like, so it won't shut you down. But then again, just always to know the risks that you were taking beforehand, like the level of risk you're gonna be at. So I would say for me, it is good to have that type of um, role play down, just so um, you won't be as sensitive to it, because you just want to be prepared. And but then again, it you never know what's gonna happen. Like, you never know how it's gonna go down. So just always be prepared, no matter what. Like, just take care of yourself. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, just echoing what Shantine said. Yeah, I think that doing preparation as much as you can beforehand is also really important. I know for direct actions that I've done lockdowns in, like, you will get in the formation that you would plan to do at the action, and you would practice people separating you. Like, you would practice people attempting to separate you. Or if you're doing like a line, practice doing a line, right? And have not just do it, right, but also practice having someone try to forcibly remove you from it, so that you can get your body familiar with the ability that other people can have to separate you in those moments during that action. Right? So preparation is key and also really important. But I also do want to, like, on the other side of that, I do want to say that I don't think there's any way to like fully prepare for when the state chooses to enact violence on your body. Like, I think there are things you can do to help you, like to help you when that moment comes. But I think that when it happens to you in that moment, like, I don't think there's like a sense of training that can fully encapsulate that for you before it happens, you know? So I think keep that in mind before you engage in direct action, is that um, if you possibly face violence, um, how will your body react? How do you think your body will react to it? Uh, right? Because it's just a whole nother feeling when you're locking down or when you're protesting and the police decide to get violent with you, right? Or when people come out of nowhere and decide that they want to intimidate you, right? So I would say again, preparation is really, really, really helpful, but also knowing that that reaction you'll get for when it happens to you in real time it can only happen to you in that moment, right? So just being careful about like whether or not you'll react. If you think you'll react in a really bad way, then maybe you're not ready for direct action yet. But if you feel like you're in a place where your body might not react as badly to physical violence, then maybe you are ready, right? So that's what I would say. And how do you prepare from a spiritual perspective? I think I think the component of physically preparing also ties into the spiritual component of preparing. Um, but also I think there's like spiritually, I think it also helps to like talk to other people about direct action and just like get their own experiences and just have your questions answered or concerns about like what does this feel like, what is your experience with direct action, what things came up for you, what feelings came up for you, and how did you choose to deal with those feelings, what work do you do that works to subside the damage that can be done during direct action, right? Because then once you feel like, I feel like preparing physically covers your physical aspect, but then also like having like conversations about it with people also prepares your body like mentally, and then that creates the whole picture of like soundness within your spirit of like, I feel like I'm ready to make this informed, like I'm ready to make an informed decision about how I'm going to engage in direct action. So yeah, I would say physically prepare is important, and also talk about it with people. So yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, thank you for saying that, because again, when you're engaging in direct actions, you have to think about not just your positionality as a person, but also the positionality that other people around you hold. For example, like you have to think about the abilities of people, like whether visible or invisible, right? You have to think about people's mental capacities, whether visible or invisible, right? These are all things that you have to think about when you're engaging in actions, because if things go haywire, then you're putting those disenfranchised people even more at risk, right? So it's again important to just look around or have as many conversations or prepare as much as you can, so that you know who is there and you have a better idea of what is currently happening in that moment. So thank you for bringing that up, because that is a very important um, component, right? Because if there are older folks or people who aren't able to move as fast, and that's things people should take into consideration when they're planning direct action. So thank you for mentioning that.
Well, thank you both so much for this workshop. I feel like we all learned so much, and it was really good to hear from from the youth, from our youth. And yeah, thank you all to the participants and to the great Q&As and questions. Yeah, it's been great to hear and just listen. And I think we're about over. The next workshop will be at 1. So yeah, take some time to yourself to get away from the screen. And yeah, it's great hearing from you too, and take care. Yeah, thank you all so much.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you all for tuning in and listening to us for an hour. So it was dope to just talk about direct action.
Yeah.
All
I
right.
was very nervous.
Well, thank you, Shundeen. Thank you, Randy. And yeah, we'll see you all later, and have a good one.